Welcome to History 2323, Lecture 4 Overview on Industrialization and the 5 Roles of Railroads. So the Industrial Revolution will actually begin in Britain, and one of those key individuals who will play a role in that, along with his daughter, the spinning Jenny, because she accidentally helped create that particular machine. But the goal was to churn out, make machines that could churn out thread or yarn or whatever to make textiles, clothing uh, in mass. And so that's what will transition clothes being made in the home to clothes being made in buying clothes made in the factory instead. But to have an IR or industrial revolution, you need to have certain things. So you can see the 5 things there. Make some sort of a ridiculous sentence like I did here for learning what each of those, so you can remember all five of them. Railroads are the key, the first big business in America. They not only provide transportation and communications because the telegraph lines move along the railroad lines usually, and then eventually telephone lines. But they also will bring the raw materials to the factories and then take the finished products throughout the country to sell. So they play a huge part of this. Trains get better and better. You can see Trevithick, I think his train went something like 4 or 5 miles an hour. Stevenson's went up to, I think, 16 miles an hour. So everything's improving, and that's going to be the nature of industrial revolution, the result of industrial revolution, because people are always trying to invent how to do things better and faster. Lots of opposition from farmers who didn't want to have, noisy trains or trains spitting out sparks through their smokestacks that would cause fires in their haystacks or whatever, to preachers saying if God wanted us to move faster than we could either run or walk, then he would have allowed us to do that. So basically the trains were breaking the laws of God. Okay, so they're the first big business. I told you that. You can see all the inventions, how they made it, trains became, they were more than just moving raw materials around, but also vacations, and you were on a train for days at a time. So wherever train hubs set up, they usually became a town of some sort. The infrastructure, interdependent economy, I've already discussed that. Role 3, national, international economy. So it takes a lot of money to build train tracks. So the investors, this is where the stock market will play a role, and the federal government will play a role with these federal land grants. Then the Pacific Railroad Act, which creates the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific companies, will then build the first transcontinental railroad. Open the West, they do that through miners and ranchers already doing it, but this is the age of the American cowboy because cattle were moved from Texas on up to cow towns. You can see the first cow town is Abilene, Kansas, and then shipped off to slaughterhouses in Chicago and then taken to the East Coast to sell in butcher shops. You can see women were involved in this. I put more information on this in your handout. But the age of the cowboy will come to an end in part because of Glidden's barbed wire. You start having that cut off free access across the Great Plains. Several harsh winters. This is in the 1880s. And then the railroads came down to Texas, so there was no need to have the long drives to go up to Kansas, Nebraska, and elsewhere to move the cattle up there to get onto the railroads. The fifth one is railroads. I told you is the first big business. The key one is the cooperation phase, and the reason why we have 4 feet 8 inches and 8.5 inches between every rail line in America is because the gauge was standardized in this period. Time zones are created so that you don't have too many of them. There's 4 major time zones, which we still use today. And then rather than having every company have their own engine to pull cars around, they standardize the couplet, which attaches one car to the other car. So that means rather than having 8 different trains go to Atlanta to Houston, you just have one train, one engine, I should say, take cars from 8 different companies to Atlanta. It saved a lot of time, and it was far more efficient. The way monopolies were created, okay, you're going to have these robber barons. These are going to be the people like Carnegie and Rockefeller. Is they would use what is called horizontal or vertical combinations. Sometimes, well, I guess combinations are going to be the best term, but they would just think of it as trying to control either one step of the whole process. Like in Carnegie's case, it was, in Rockefeller's case, it was refining oil. Okay, and this initially this was going to be for kerosene, and then eventually for gasoline. But so all the refineries in America, 90% of them were controlled by him, whereas someone like Carnegie or others would use the vertical, which was you would own the iron ore mines where the steel would eventually was dug up, and then eventually you would own the plants where the steel, the final product, was sold. You'd control the whole process. So as we get into this gap between rich and poor, you're going to hear things like gospel of wealth or the social gospel, and then the expanding difference between rich and poor, gap between rich and poor. Those things start here, and really, in many ways, they haven't ended. So this concludes the Theme 1 Industrialization phase of Lecture 4.